Okay, welcome back, everybody. I'll take a motion to reopen the committee of the whole, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of reopening the committee meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the meeting is open. I also want to comment that while we were in closed session, Commissioner Alper and Commissioner Schaefer came into the room. And with that, I will adjourn the committee of the whole. And I get to hit the gavel again.
Yep.
At this time, I will call the regular meeting of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board for January 7th, 2025 to order. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Alper.
Present.
Commissioner Forney.
Here.
Commissioner Menz.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Rucker.
Here.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Present.
Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
Vice President Musich.
Present.
President DeBenny.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. A note about the agenda before we move the agenda for approval. For tonight, I'm moving the reports of officers up in the agenda. So that said, the agenda is before us. May I have a motion to approve or adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to...
I seconded it.
Yep, we have a proper motion in front of us. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. I'll also note that in addition to our usual open time at 5:30, we have a public hearing at 5:45. And with that, as I mentioned, we will move the reports of officers to this part of the agenda.
Thank you, President Benny and Commissioners. I'm always waiting for the, sorry about that. I was waiting for the introduction, so thank you.
Sorry, thank
No,
you,
no, it's
Superintendent.
new. Thank you. All right, so again, I think that, again, appreciate being able to do this at the beginning of the meeting. Remind folks that are watching that all of these updates that we give in the report of officers is regarding and revolves around strategic directions, performance measures for our board that the board has adopted. And so we reflect that in the work that we do every day in our organization. And so these reflect the board's agenda for performance measures and strategic directions. So we'll start with strategic direction A, act boldly for our climate future. Ole Olson Park Trail connection. The introduction of the 1,155 feet of new trail links creates a link to more than 40 miles of parkway trails with Theodore Wirth Regional Park connected to the west through the 26th Street Overlook and Minnehaha Falls via West River Parkway to the south. The project removed more than 33,500 tons of chemical and debris contamination from previous industrial uses at the site. Prairie landscape will be expanded by more than 2 acres and will be augmented by more than 1.5 acre. New traditional turf grasses will be used. No traditional turf grasses will be used. Work will continue through the winter with steel and electrical work, then planting and trail amenities in April and May, following by a grand opening in May. Park staff invited supporting organizations to tour the work underway on the trail. Participants included Kevin Reich with the MWMO, Representative Fu Lee, and representatives from BNSF and Continental Cement. Continental Cement's representatives included individuals from Denver and St. Louis. The project had widespread support, including funds from the state of Minnesota and the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, and donated trail easements from BNSF, Railroad, and significantly Continental Cement, which donated an easement for the trail of more than 47,000 square feet. I could say so much about this. I know that, of course, Council Reif talked about this, but it was a pleasure being down there and seeing this trail, this historic, really transformative opportunity from the north side. We know 94 cut off the north. We're connecting to the river now into our trails, so this is really an incredible project, and very excited. So, strategic direction B, cultivate each community's place and honor cultural traditions in Minneapolis parks. Movies made right here, the Nicollet Island edition. This is really cool. This winter, Nicollet Island Pavilion transforms into a cozy movie theater for movies made right here, a free film series celebrating movies set in and filmed around Minneapolis, all within 2 miles of the pavilion, from iconic landmarks like the Stone Arch Bridge and Minnehaha Falls to the beloved parks such as Nicollet Island Park, this series shines a spotlight on the cities we call home. As an extension of our beloved movies and music in the park summer series, this winter edition brings the same community spirit and love for local entertainment indoors, keeping the tradition alive through the colder months. We kicked off a series on November 17th, 2024 with Jingle All the Way. That was in 1996, featuring Nicollet Island Pavilion and its famous Santa Brawl scene. The series, I always enjoy watching that. The series continues with local classics including Untamed Heart, Grumpy Old Men, Mighty Ducks, and D2 Mighty Ducks in a special doubleheader during the state hockey tournament, and the Heartbreak Kid and the Little Big League. So our team does a great job in this, and to think about this is actually really cool. So I will be attending those and enjoying that too. So hope you guys can make it and our community can make it to it. It's a great event. Strategic Direction C, implement quality youth and intergenerational programs. Spark Studios. In December, Spark Studios staff celebrated 2 years as a team. Over the past 2 years, 3 studios were opened, which offered a variety of programming for youth that included open studio, homework help, audio recording, graphic design, photography, video animation, STEAM experiments, music practice, creative writing, sports media, esports, 3D printing, and a tech literacy games. Over the past 2 years, Spark Studios has offered 400 programs, camps, and employment opportunities with almost 7,000 youth participating. Spark Studios has developed a community partnerships, built relationships with families, and has developed a curriculum focused on MPRB Strategic Direction C, implement quality youth and intergenerational programs. All right. And we have more opening up here this year and next year too, of course, to get our full 6 Spark Studios. Strategic Direction D, care for park assets to meet evolving needs and practices. The horticultural winterized rose collection. Despite having no business growing roses, MPRB boasts the 2nd oldest public rose garden in the country. For well over 100 years, staff have been protecting the garden's collection ahead of every winter season, while practices and techniques have modernized over the decade. It is still a physically demanding task to complete the process. This year, the team moved 13 dump truck loads of leaves from our neighbor, Lakewood Cemetery, to cover 51 of our 64 rose beds to insulate them for the season. The remaining 13 beds contain hardier rose varieties and can withstand our Minnesota winters without extra support. And our last one, Strategic Direction E, steward our natural resources. Lake ice update. MPRB has monitored ice conditions on the Minneapolis lakes since the 1960s. While last year's ice formation process was delayed due to warm weather, this year's formation dates were consistent with historic averages. Smaller MPRB lakes froze over Thanksgiving weekend. The large lakes, such as Cedar, Harriet, and the Bedemakoska, took longer to freeze, with Cedar completing its freeze on December 12th, Bedemakoska and Harriet completely ice-covered on December 13th. Though the lakes are frozen, the quality and the thickness of the ice is variable, so patrons should always exercise extreme caution. The photo shows a rare phenomenon called frost flowers on Lake Harriet. These delicate clusters of ice crystals can form on top of the newly frozen ice only when very cold and nearly still air is present. Frost flowers are more commonly found on fresh sea ice, but can form on newly frozen freshwater lakes. And by the way, that was one of the, Instagram, I think is one of the highly most visited photos, and so there's great response to this amazing phenomenon. So thank you, President Abene and Commissioners. If you have any questions, we are available to answer, and thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. It's a beautiful photo, and I saw it. I did see it on Instagram. So. Are there any questions for the Superintendent? Okay, with that, We'll go ahead and move on to reports of appointees to outside boards and commissions. I want to announce at the beginning here that I've got a couple of updated appointments. I'm appointing Commissioner Thompson to the Lake Street Greenway Partnership, and I'm appointing myself to the Cedar Riverside Partnership. Are there any reports from any of the commissioners? Commissioner Forney.
Thank you, Madam President. I am no longer the appointee to the Blue Line, but I wanted to inform everybody that as of next Tuesday, the 14th, there will be an open house showing the Lowry Station variety of proposals. Thanks to Director Arvidsson and everything, I have to commend the project staff for really thinking outside of this box, and I would encourage people to attend that. Like I say, it's going to be at the North Regional Library, like I say, between 5 and 7 on the 14th.
Thank you. All right. We can move to the consent business. Commissioner Thompson.
I would love to pull Resolution 2024-281 from consent, but other than that, I'm happy to move the other ones unless my colleagues want to pull something.
So please, we move the,
I-
as a slate?
I
or-
will move as a slate all the other ones.
Okay.
Excuse me. I would also like to pull Resolution 2025-2.
Okay.
I would like to pull 2024-278.
Dash 279? Okay, thank you. So we have a motion to move the remaining consent business items as a slate.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of moving the consent items as a slate, except for the ones that have been pulled, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those are moved or carried. That passes. Okay, so let's go ahead then to resolution in order, 2024-278.
I'll move Resolution 2024-278. This is a resolution awarding a construction contract to Blackstone Contractors LLC for the base bid amount of $493,946.50 and accepting add alternate number 1 in the amount of $11,550 for a total contract amount of $505,496.50 for the Falwell Site Improvement Project bid event number 3324, pending approval by the City of Minneapolis Finance and Property Services Procurement Division and Minneapolis Civil Rights Department, and further authorizing administrative use of a 5% construction contingency up to $25,274.83. I appreciate whoever made all of these numbers so difficult to read. For necessary construction change orders that may arise with the contract.
Second.
Thank you. We have a proper motion before us. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Menz.
Yeah, I was hoping to get a couple of questions answered about this particular project. I didn't see necessarily some supporting documents, and I'm also wondering about the total cost of that project. And this is more of a general question, but also something that comes up. It seems like that project is going to cost significantly more than it would in other places. Can you explain maybe how those things come about? Because we see folks in the community who see phases of this project and then wonder when the remaining phases are coming. And I know that this is addressing part of the all-wheel park. So just a general understanding of how that comes to be, and then what is the anticipated, or do we have any anticipated completion dates of the full all-wheel park?
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Passy and Mr. Swenson. Can you turn your mic? Yep, there we go. Yep.
Is it up? Okay, there we go. I'll try to answer your question in parts. I think one of the first questions you asked was the total project costs. So we had the project split into two bid packages, one for like the general site work, all the grading, and then one for the skate park itself. And so the total cost is 1.7 million. I don't know if that's more than most skate park projects. We had bid it originally this spring and the bids came in higher, so we had to kind of like scale it back. I'm not sure what Painter or some of the other ones came in at. In terms of the building of the project and like when we anticipate building the full build, we don't really have a timeline for that. The skate park itself was reduced somewhat, but it's still a pretty large skate park. I think it was around 9,000 square feet. So in terms of like the full build, I don't know the size or the scale, but it would be sometime when we have future funds available.
When we bid it out, did we get a price of the full park, or did we just bid out for this particular phase?
The first time we bid it, we bid a second portion, which was like a transitional area, which was probably an additional 3,000 to 4,000 square feet, and that came well in over budget. We bid out just the portion that you will see in the plans that we attached to the document, so not the full. We did not bid out the full project.
Okay, but we don't necessarily go through a cost analysis of what these projects might cost at other places or other parks in the state or in different places. We don't kind of look at those issues, or do we?
That's a good question. Cliff, I don't know, maybe you can answer that.
Chair, President Abeni, Commissioner Menz, we're implementing an approved design. We don't go and look at what these things, the same project would cost to build in Duluth or St. Cloud or Rochester. We don't do that. Projects within Minneapolis typically are 20 to 30% higher than we would see in our suburban park systems. That's typical of what we kind of see across the board, not just in skate parks.
Mm-hmm.
So we know things are at a premium here, but it was a significant amount of work done by Crystal and the design team to kind of reconfigure that skate park portion so that we could still construct a skate park as approved by the board, and actually matches the grant that we received from Hennepin County to implement that skate park.
And do we consult out for other design work of the specific space? I'm wondering, like, do we consult out for that too? Is that a separate contract from the build contract?
Yeah, we actually, thank you for the question. We had a design contractor, Hunger, designed the skate park. They're a skate park company. I think they're out of Ohio, and they were a sub-consultant of our landscape architect who designed the full project.
Okay. I know that there's been a lot of talk within the community around like creating design build structures to where the designer is actually the builder as well. And I think that might be a way for us to create more efficiency. I don't know how we can structure those situations.
President Abeni, Commissioner Menz, we would love to implement design build, but state bidding and procurement rules, laws do not allow us to do a design bid build for a skate park.
Great. It looks like it's going to be a great facility. Do we have any sort of general estimate on how much the rest of the bowls would cost? And if there's any sort of funding sources that people can sort of be on the lookout for that?
Thank you. That's a good question. So we actually are building all of the bowls that we originally proposed in the concept plan. So all of those will be built. We are also building a kind of smaller, more street-style skating area. The part that we would build in the future would be more of like a transitional space. And I think I don't have a number for that, and I can get that to you. We also proposed, but we really didn't design very fully, another large bowl, but we didn't have a cost for that at this time.
Great. Thanks for answering those questions. I know that in my community, Northeast Park is planned for a huge skate facility or all-wheel facility. So just trying to do my due diligence and make sure that I understand how that process goes and how we can make it more efficient. Thank you, commissioners, for giving me the time.
Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you so much. I have a question that came up in the process of the questions being answered from Commissioner Menz. And that was, Director Swenson, you said that projects in Minneapolis typically cost 20 to 30% higher than the suburbs, which is a significant dollar amount. Would you care to give a couple of factors as to why that is that way? I can understand if it was a completely different jurisdiction or faraway state, but this is just our neighbors in the suburbs.
Yeah, President Benny, Commissioner Thompson, I'd rather not do it just off the cuff. So we'll pull together some information, we'll share it with
That would be
commissioners.
fantastic.
If you'd like a formal presentation, we could do that. But-
Yeah, I would love to understand the factors as to how it makes it so much more expensive.
And I'll just say in general, you know, to meet the civil rights requirements, to make sure that underserved communities are being allowed to look and bid on these projects, you know, there's a cost to that. So as an agency, we're doing our very best to include all of those underserved communities, at least the ability to price and be a part of the workforce that works on these projects, as well as can be businesses that would bid on these projects. So yes, there could be an upcharge for that, but again, there's decisions been made by the council and by this board to follow those WBE, MBE civil rights requirements in our projects.
So I just have one quick follow-up question. The civil rights requirements, are those coming from the city?
President.
Jurisdictionally, obviously, we're the city too, but most people don't know the nuance.
Right, President Benny, Commissioner Thompson. So we work with city procurement and the Department of Civil Rights, and the Department of Civil Rights prepares those WBE requirements, MBE requirements for each of our projects. And so there are percentages that each of the public bidders have to comply with in order to be awarded a project. And if you notice in the language of our bids, you'll see that it's that you all can vote on the contract to award that, but it's pending approval by civil rights. So we want to make sure all their good faith efforts, all of their contractors that they've said they're going to use that meet the WB MBE requirements are actual, and that they've met those percentages. So yes, it comes from the city and it comes from the Department of Civil Rights. But again, we've adopted as a board, you all, maybe not this specific board, but you've adopted to follow those same financial principles.
That was my next question, was that did we as a body, not us, which is why I'm asking this question, so I know, adopt those in conjunction? Okay, thank you. I just appreciate that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. You know, Mr. Swenson, since this line of questioning's come up, maybe you could clarify something with, 5 sentences during the design phase of a project. Estimating is paired with that, so that when you go out, when you're scoping a project, right, you're within budget. And so then the bids come in, they may be higher, but they're not that far off typically. So can you express that a little bit to us so we understand? That it's not just a dart on a board at the time of the bids. The bids are looked at against something with information.
President Benny, you're correct. The consultant team that we put together will include a cost estimator. Though that experience, it's typically an arm of a general contractor or a construction manager goes out to the market and looks at, sends the design out, receives pricing back so that we can see where our costs are. In the case of this project, it did come back higher than what was estimated. So that's why we redesigned and then we put it back out on the street for bidding. I will just say that construction of skate parks, that's one of the reasons why you'll see two contractors working on the skate park, the two contracts that you're looking at to approve tonight. One is for the basic work that a lot of our contractors can do, grading, excavating, utilities, demolition, all of that. There are many, many contractors that can do that. but the actual building of these skate parks is a specialized construction. So we separated that out so that we would get contractors that have those requirements and can bid just on the work that they do. Oftentimes, not all of the concrete work associated with skate parks, but a majority of it, there are people that come from throughout the country to do those, the bowl construction and finishing of those pool-type structures that make up a skate park. So, yes, thank you.
That was helpful. Thank you very much for that. Are there additional questions or discussion? All right, well, let's go ahead and take Resolution 2024-278 to a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That resolution passes. Okay, resolution.
I will move Resolution 2024-281, the resolution approving the First Amendment to the Phillips Pool Shared Use Agreement between the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board and the Minneapolis Public Schools Special School District Number 1, extending the effective date of the agreement to June 30th, 2025.
Second.
All right, is there discussion? Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, President Abeni. I was just curious, sorry, I had this pulled up here and then I shut down my computer. I'm just curious, the nuance of this. I had a couple questions of what have we been doing since March of '24 when this expired. Why are we having this stopgap, and what happened to the just the details of the partnership? Because I know that this particular space has a lot of history to it, and as do our two organizations. Is anybody in the room able to answer those questions?
Ms. Downey? No, Mr. Swenson. Okay.
President Benny, Commissioner
win.
Thompson, Jack Barch, and myself will try to answer those questions for you. So the school board has been following the arrangements under the original agreement, and what we're trying to do is get it to a termination and bring a new agreement before you. So they've been making the payments as originally laid out in the agreement for all of their use. And we, for those of you who attended the joint meeting between MPS and the park board here, know that we meet on a monthly basis with a group within MPS that does the construction and manages these agreements. So we've been having discussions with Jack and others about how that arrangement could be changed that would work better for us and work better for the school board. So that's ongoing, and we don't have it finalized yet, but we would bring that to the board. I don't know, Jack, if you have anything you want to add or put them on the spot.
I think that's
Now
part
we've
of the
asked
nature of why I wanted to talk or ask questions about this, because there's a whereas clause because you're saying that we're kind of in a stopgap situation, which is what this reads as. But then there's this whereas clause that says beginning in the 2025-26 swim season, MPS will no longer pay a yearly fee. And that's the part that I'm like, wait, are we ending this? Is it going to June 25? Is this speaking toward the future? So I guess it's kind of all that made me curious.
And before we address that, we actually are at the
Oh, shoot, are we at time certain?
We're at the time of
Sorry.
open time. So if we could pause, I think it's a
Good
great
catch.
point to pause. And I don't have a sign-up list here. I'm going to go ahead and read the rules, and I don't know if anyone signed up, so I can't do the math just yet, but thanks to those of you who have come to speak during tonight's open time. The board's open time rules are as follows. I will call on people from the speaker list only. Names are added to the speaker list by calling in before 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting or by adding it in person at the board meeting before 5:30 p.m. The time allotted for all speakers shall not exceed 15 minutes. So I'll allocate, once I know how many speakers we have, I don't think it'll be many, it looks like. I'll allot the amount of time here. Time may not be transferred to somebody else. Please watch the timer behind me and stay within your allotted time. This is an opportunity for you to address the board. We are listening, but we will not respond. That said, please don't hesitate to contact any of the commissioners for dialogue and further discussion. To protect the privacy of individuals, please refrain from commenting on specific personnel issues or pending litigation. Discriminatory or harassing words directed at anyone will not be tolerated. And each speaker is asked to state their name and address. And with that, I wonder if there's a list. We have 3 names. So I'll give 3 minutes per speaker. Thank you, Secretary. The first name is Jack Warner, then Mike Tate, then Charles Moses. So Jake Warner? Jake, sorry, Jake.
Jake Warner, west side of Cedar Lake occupant. At the October 1st, 2024 park meeting, Commissioner Schaefer gave an impassioned statement regarding inconsistencies in relation to the 54th Street and Minnehaha Dog Park. She stated, and I quote, "If there are any other areas in our park system, in the whole park system, that have been grandfathered into a kind of use that is not in compliance with our standards, it becomes very painful for the community and for us as commissioners when we have inconsistencies like this in our system. When we have inconsistencies like this between our policies and common use, we need to clean it up. I want to address a grave inconsistency of the Park Board. It is ironic that after Commissioner Schaefer's strong rebuke of any inconsistency in the system, this one exists in her district. I am referencing the private use of public park land at the southeast side of Cedar Lake Park and the south side of Kenilworth Channel. The 16 residences along here have had exclusive private use of the public's park land for 86 years, all with the flimsy argument that some residents were issued, and they were issued temporary encroachment permits, not licenses, back in 1938. For 86 years, the Park Board has facilitated, supported, and condoned this situation. The Park Board's endorsement of the Cedar Isles Master Plan locks this private use of public park land in place for another 30 years. The bedrock principle of the Park Board is that public park land belongs to the people and has guaranteed public access. All Park Board land is land held for the public good, for the commons, not for the pleasure of the few residents at Southeast Cedar Lake. A Star Tribune columnist, Maggie Korth, recently penned the article titled, "This Land is Our Land, but it sure feels like their land. The weirdness of a half mile of Minneapolis lakeshore that is parkland, but has become an extension of homeowners' backyards." She tried to walk the park-owned lakeshore at Southeast Cedar Lake. Due to private encroachment, she was unable to continue her walk halfway through and turned back. She wrote this, quote, "At Cedar Lake, there has been total privatization. The public has all but lost the ability to use their parkland. Today, it's nearly impossible to even tell there is a public right-of-way around the southeast side of Cedar Lake." Her walking partner, MinnPost journalist Andrew Tillman, had earlier opined the situation in an article, "Parks for All? Minneapolis should do better along Cedar Lake. The public park-owned shoreline at Southeast Cedar Lake has been de facto privatized by homeowners. Privately maintained landscaping and hardscaping on park property has made it unwelcoming and infeasible for the public to enjoy this lakefront park. This situation is not consistent with Park Board standards, policies, or values. It is an inconsistency of the highest order and a breach of public trust, and it needs to be cleaned up."
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Mike Tate?
Well, good evening, my friends. How you doing? See, I got a new sign, and it's very concerning to me. I've been trying to hold back, but nobody's addressing this problem. This systemic racism around recreation, and it has to stop. And I've asked many of you to put policy in place to make it stop, and that hasn't happened. And it hasn't happened for years because nobody really wants to deal with the problem. The folks around here keeping them coming up with ideals for our community and not inviting us into the room. Many of these people do not deal with what I deal with every day, which is youth development and how that looks. Some of my other organizations the Hospitality House, the Jerry Gambles, the Way, the Phelps Parks, all those outside organizations that, again, with this new policy that you're finna vote on or put in place, is discriminatory to, again, the people that serve them organizations, right? And again, when you just talk about this sign that I have, it goes a little bit further, y'all. It goes to the part where we're not even taking care of autistic kids, kids in wheelchairs. Have you ever thought about those kids playing in our parks and in our buildings? Systemically, it's a mistake by the staff, by the leaders, and by the board. All we are trying to do is put up buildings and not support the building of what we're putting up. It's nice to have nice skate parks, but if ain't no kid playing in them, it don't make no difference. Yeah, we got numbers on the, what do we call it, the Spark Center. Well, guess what? Is that the new way where we're headed? Do we want to take the recreation out of sports and call it tech centers and let the communities deal with the recreation part? That way you don't have to pay the salaries. We'll go do it and we'll get paid in a way that's meaningful. Now I want to go to the BET. Meg, you called Coach and said what? Come and give a testimony to the BET so we can save jobs. Correct? I go there, I speak to the mayor, I speak to the other board members on that task, and guess what? I said this, please keep all the jobs, hold all the recreation people accountable to the jobs and the programming. Did I not say that, Ms. Benny, President? I said that. I come back and hear y'all done moved $330,000 to build some roads that I dealt with 2016. If you, none of y'all remember that because y'all know Coach then. NPP, that was Coach, okay? They called me in then to speak about the same thing I'm speaking to y'all about right now. My life is this, y'all. If you don't get voted in again next year, guess where Coach is still gonna be? Right here fighting for our children.
Thank you, Coach. Charles Moses.
Good evening, Board. My name is Charles Moses, North Minneapolis Community Executive Director for Hospitality House Youth Development, celebrating our 65th year of existence as of 7 days ago. I'm here to address the matter or to speak on the business of the new registration policy that I was informed of on the eve of our Christmas season. In this letter that was sent to me, it was communicated the decision that has already been made to exclude pre-existing teams and organizations such as the one that I serve in and Mr. Christopher Davis has served in as nearly a decade and grew up in Hospitality House Youth Development. HHYD was founded in athletics by Woody Larson 65 years ago, I believe, before Minneapolis ever even had a hand in providing athletic services to youth in the inner city. And to receive this letter on the eve of Christmas with less than 3 months notification that our beautiful children that are enrolled at Hospitality House will no longer be able to sign up and register to play inner city athletics through Hospitality House in Minneapolis Park and Rec, frankly, was a slap in the face and an insult to me and my staff. I cannot begin to tell you how the news of that information totally took the direction of what we planned that day off the rail and into the holiday season to figure out how a program that is as integral as athletics to Hospitality House Youth Development will continue to thrive and go on with this eviction from the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. I'm in no position to tell you how to run your parks, but I do believe that as an organization that has served and stood in the community for 65 years, we are owed more than this. to have a conversation, to be brought in. This letter was addressed personally to Hospitality House Youth Development. It says in the letter that organizations such as ours are deeply appreciated. I believe that that was a waste of ink on your part because we do not feel deeply appreciated. If there's anything that could be done to potentially alter the course of this for an organization such as ours, I would love to have that conversation. But frankly, I feel that that decision was made by your board and was communicated to me with no respect.
Thank you. And with that, we'll close open time. And we were in the process of discussing, we have before us Resolution 2024-281. Commissioner Thompson had asked some questions, and Mr. Swenson and Mr. Bartsch are coming back up. Do you remember the question, or do you need it restated again?
President Benny, Commissioner Thompson, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, thank you for being here and swinging right back into things. My question was, the way that this reads, so my preamble and then my question, the way that this reads is it's a little confusing. It says the agreement ended on in March of 24. This is going till June of 25, and yet then in the middle there's a clause talking about 25 and 26 swim seasons, and it's adjusting cost structures, and so I am just trying to understand what we're actually voting for. Is it just an extension of what we have, or is it a new thing? That's.
Sure.
I hope that helps.
Yeah.
It's not really a
Thank you.
question.
President Benny, Commissioner Thompson, we are going to continue the contract with MPS through the 2025 year. Starting in 2026, we want to charge the hourly rate, which we do for MPS when it comes to like field rentals or gym rentals or situations like that. So it's just through 2025. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think it's because I didn't get a chance before this to read through the total former agreement, and I don't even know if it was put in the packet, but it just goes till June 30th. Is that correct?
Right.
Are we going to be revisiting this sometime in this calendar year, or no? Do you think we'll just, in part of your conversation, I know there's a lot of management conversations happening, so I'm just curious what to expect.
President Benny, Commissioner Thompson, the plan is to continue with this contract and then move towards the hourly rate. We met with representatives from the Minneapolis Public Schools, and they are in agreement that moving forward, that will be the best way to get access to the pool. So we will continue this through June, and then we're going to switch to that new model.
And will we have will we fully versed at that time of like different fee structures and what would happen at this location?
Sure. President Benny, Commissioner Thompson, it's the board-approved fees that we'll be using.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see other lights are on, but we do have another time certain public hearing. I don't know, Secretary, has anyone signed up to speak? We're checking. So I read the rules for open time a few minutes ago, 15 to be exact, and the rules are basically the same. So in this case, we'll give up to 3 minutes for anyone that's here to speak. The public hearing is for the extended second public hearing for renaming XL Field Park to XL Energy Park. And we'll just wait and see if we have anybody signed up. Okay, no one is here to speak to that, so with that, I'll close the public hearing and we'll go back to the Resolution 2024-281. Commissioner Menz's light was on next.
Thank you, President Benny. I do have a question about the cost, because I know that there was a reduction for the Phillips Pool from the budget, so I'm wondering, is that reinstated back to what it used to be for the year? So is there an additional amount of money that the school district is going to give us because we're under the old contract, or was that changed in a year past? And I'm sorry, my internet's not working, so I can't pull up the agreement right now. But I remember that we reduced the amount of revenue we were getting regards to Phillips Pool from MPS is that revenue changed because of this addendum? Or reverted back to the original?
Looks like we'll welcome Mr. Swenson and Mr. Barsh back.
I think it was 150,000 and then it was reduced to 85,000. Like what are we gonna get from the school district for this agreement this year?
President Benny, Commissioner Menz, we thought you were still in a public hearing, so we were just sharing.
Oh, sorry,
So
it
sorry
happened
about
so
that.
fast.
Yeah, it did.
That was
So,
the
but we'll be
problem,
able
yeah.
to answer it, I think.
President Benny, Commissioner Mentz, it'll be the 150,000 for this year.
So that means that we have an additional $65,000 for the budget? Because the budget we approved, I think, was related to 85,000. So what happens with that additional money that would be coming in?
Yep. And I'll just comment, if that is a question that can't be answered, we can follow up with Julie Wiseman,
Definitely.
Director Wiseman.
Okay, Director
fair?
Wiseman would know that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
If you want to maybe just trigger an email, and we can take a look at that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barsh.
Mr. Barsh, thank you, thank you. Commissioner Schaefer?
Yes, and mine was just what was the cost income differential between the 150,000 and then switching to the fee schedule?
President Benny. Oh, not working. Commissioner Schaefer.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Barsh, yeah.
Off the top of my head, I can't give you those numbers, but I can go back and meet with Assistant Superintendent Kalb and the manager of aquatics, and we can get the board those numbers. I think it's going to be similar to what it's always been. It's just a smoother process, and this is what we've been doing for fields, gyms, and other things with MPS, and we were all in agreement, representatives from MPS and our representative, that this would be a smoother process in the future. Pay for what you use.
Right. That's helpful to know that it's similar, but if and when you get the data.
Yep,
we can
we'll
send
get
it.
you that as soon
Thanks.
as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one question, Commissioner Schaefer, yeah? I mean, Commissioner Alper, yeah.
Thank you. I figured out the light situation at my new spot. Yes, I just have a comment, and in light of this topic, I think it's relevant. I just want to let you know that I received an email this past week that the Phillips pool will actually be closed now on Sundays, although it previously had Sunday hours. So I just want to say what a valuable asset this is to our community, and I think we had a lot of overlap in terms of with the school board in terms of shared values around teaching kids to swim, and so I hope that can be reconsidered. And also, I know that the pool frequently closes in the summer, and I think it would be great to, there's a lot of like yo-yoing with the schedule that occurs, and if there's any way that some of the communication around the pool and availability can be streamlined, I just want to take that opportunity to share that, because it is such a valued resource. I mean, it was pulled from consent, not by me, who is the district representative, but you know, we can tell that there's a shared interest around this aquatic center across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Alper. Are there additional comments? Discussion? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and take Resolution 2024-281 to a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That resolution carries. That motion carries. And then we had one other pulled. Commissioner Forney?
Thank you, President Habene. I'd like to move Resolution 2025-2 with some other members of the dais. Resolution honoring the life and accomplishments of Carrie Marie Wiesek.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
I'm going to second it, because that's the part that's in our agenda.
Yep.
So now we can read the resolution in its entirety.
Right, so I'm going to read the resolution now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Whereas Carrie Wiesek served as Minnesota State Senator representing the Northeast, Southeast, Seward, and Cedar Riverside communities in Minneapolis from 2012 to 2024 until her death on December 27th, 2024. Whereas Carrie Wiesek was the oldest of 6 children to Walt and Pat Wiesek a graduate of Edison High School and the University of Minnesota with a degree in mechanical engineering.
Whereas, like her father, Walt, Carrie served in the public in many ways throughout her career, including as a Minneapolis City Council aide, assistant to U.S. Senator Paul Wellstone, chair of the Minneapolis City Charter Commission, policy aide to Hennepin County Attorney Michael O. Freeman, policy aide to Hennepin County Commissioner Mark Stenglin, and a Minnesota State Senator. Whereas Carrie worked as a bridge builder literally and figuratively for projects such as the Lowry Avenue Bridge, the 3rd Avenue Central Avenue Bridge, the Stone Arch Bridge, the 10th Avenue Bridge, and the Franklin Avenue Bridge, by working with engineers and the community to ensure the bridges were structurally sound and designed to maximize the safety for vehicles, and separately to ensure the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists on those bridges. And of utmost importance was Carrie's efforts to secure the initial $1 million to begin the planning and restoration of the Stone Arch Bridge, which is currently underway.
Whereas Senator Dietzick also worked to reclaim the Mississippi riverfront above the St. Anthony Falls for the public and to bring public ownership and recreational use back to the riverfront by the actions of supporting the recreation of Halls Island, the cleanup of the polluted site at the Scherer Brothers property, now Graco Park, and the appropriation of funds to allow the Park Board to acquire additional land on the riverfront. Whereas Senator Dietzick authored bills for appropriations for waterworks, LCCMR funds for habitat connectivity for the urban Mississippi Flyway, Bohemian Flats restoration, the mussel reintroduction program above St. Anthony Falls, and the funding for the exhibits at the Carl Cronin Interpretive Center. And
whereas Carrie was also supportive of efforts to maintain the independence of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board when she chaired the Charter Commission and ensure the funding allocations of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board were maintained at the state level for youth employment, bike safety, and ensuring that the falls of St. Anthony kept flowing and was not diverted to private use. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board publicly acknowledges the great work that Carrie Dietzick did for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, the City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, and the state of Minnesota in all her works as Minnesota State Senator, particularly in her role as the Senate Majority Leader from 2023 to 2024. Be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners supports for naming a park asset in recognition of Carrie Dietzick's contribution to the park system as a citizen and elected official. And
Be it further resolved, that the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board wishes to convey its sincere appreciation to the Dietzick family for the service of Carrie and all she has contributed to our great park system.
Thank you. Is there any other further discussion? All right, well, I think we can take this resolution to,
Commissioner Menz has his light on.
oh, do you want to still say something, Commissioner Menz? Oh, okay.
yeah, I think,
Do we need a second?
I already seconded it.
Yeah.
thank you, President. Thank you, President Benny. It's very hard to be in my community without hearing the Dietzick name multiple times a day, especially walking around Edison High School and being at this park board. Carrie Dietzick, I did not know Carrie very well, but I do know many folks who have had an extreme impact from her life. And what she did for the state during a time that was very, very challenging, and to consider that she did that with cancer is quite an amazing. All I know is that there are a few people in my life that I would consider heroes, and I think that Carrie was one of those people who, the way that she moved through life and the way that she attacked her job and getting funding and support and the integrity that she held as a elected official and as a community member is incredible. But what I really think is important is that it was obvious that Carrie valued her family and valued the family of Northeast Minneapolis. And I think that all of us in Northeast are very, very sad that we've lost her. And the quick turnaround of trying to find another representative is challenging to many in the community who are still grieving. So thank you to the board. Thank you to Council Rice, to former President Forney for putting this resolution forward, not for me, but for my community, because they really have valued the Carrie's role and specifically the Dietzick family. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Forney and Council Rice as well. Okay, I think we're ready to go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor of Resolution 2025-2, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That resolution passes. Okay, so
Moving on to unfinished business.
we are on unfinished business.
I will move.
We have one item. Would somebody move that resolution?
I'll move Resolution 2025-1, a resolution approving amendment number 2 to the existing lease agreement with the Superintendent Alfred Bangora for residential leasing of the Theodore Worth Home and Administration Building located at 3954 Bryant Avenue South and within Lindale Farmstead Park.
Second?
Thank you. Is there any discussion? I'd like to, yes, Commissioner Musich?
Thank you, President.
Vice President
Benny,
Musich?
I appreciate it. I just wanted to thank you, Superintendent Bangora, for continuing to live in this home with your family and for all of the work that all of you are doing to help restore the building and ensure that it can continue to house superintendents well into the future. When you moved in, it was not in the greatest of shape, and I'm just thrilled with all the work that you're doing to make that happen. So thank you very much for being willing to live in this very public space and also beautify it for the public as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Musich. Any other questions or discussion? Okay. All those in favor of Resolution 2020?
Need a roll call.
Thank you. I'll ask the Secretary to take the roll.
Commissioner Elper.
Aye.
Commissioner Forney.
Aye.
Commissioner Menz.
Aye.
Commissioner Olson.
Aye.
Commissioner Rucker.
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson.
Aye.
Vice President Musich.
Aye.
President Abeni.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Then we'll move to the final item on the agenda this evening, and that is a discussion item on the cannabis and THC policy public comment period discussion item. So I welcome Deputy Superintendent Ringgold. Thank you.
Thank you, President Abeni and Commissioners. Tonight, I bring before you the study item for the cannabis and THC public comment period. As you are familiar, this is a normal stop in the process when we have a public comment period to do a presentation to the board on the items that are out for public comment. It's also an opportunity to do one last push to the community, encouraging individuals to take a moment to comment on the policies that we have available for them. We are out for public comment on two draft policies. One is the cannabis and tobacco policy. The other one is a THC policy. And we're out for public comment on these based on Resolution 2024-217 that you approved last year. The public comment has been open since mid-December, since I have to actually think for a minute when it opened. I think it opened in the end of November and will be open through January 21st at 4:30 p.m. The policies are online, www.minneapolisparks.org. There's a SurveyMonkey survey that we ask people to fill out. That SurveyMonkey not only allows the individuals to give responses on the actual policies, maybe comments to them or specific word changes, things like that. It also lets them indicate whether it goes too far, meets expectations, or doesn't meet expectations in terms of the type of direction the community would want the board to place on these items. The surveys and the policy are available in Spanish, Somali, and Hmong in addition to English. As a reminder, Minnesota legalized cannabis for individuals over 21 and older, and that was effective August 1st of 2023. We have had several conversations, several different study items with this board on this topic, and have come to the point where we understood that in order to prohibit it in any way within the Minneapolis park system, you would have to take some action. And we landed on a policy as what we would put out for public comment. And then we also talked quite a bit about whether you would want to explore the sale of THC edibles and gummies within, or beverages within our concessions and our events. The retail of actual sale within the state of Minnesota is projected to start in 2025. I'm not certain it's going to actually meet that first quarter, but it is projected to start in 2025. So in terms of the cannabis and tobacco policy, the intent of this particular policy was to add cannabis to the existing tobacco policy. As a policy, the enforcement would be similar to what we do for tobacco, which is looking at no smoking or vaping. And it is enforcement that is essentially done by community and staff members. It's an encouraging people to be compliant, to not smoke or vape cannabis or tobacco within the park system. There's no penalty associated with this. And what ends up happening in this particular situation is in the event that the individual doesn't comply, you can get to a point where the individual can be ejected from park property. I won't go over this in detail, but this is essentially the redlined version of the tobacco policy. And it simplifies some of the language of the previous tobacco policy. It takes out some of the language because at the time that was crafted, it was like the first year and there was going to be some additional checkup on that. So it pulls that language out, makes it more simplified, adds in the smoking of vaping of cannabis, and it also pulls the ceremonial use of tobacco out very specifically and removes the need for there to be any type of permit or direction from the superintendent for individuals to use tobacco in a ceremonial way within the park system. It simplifies the definitions and obviously adds cannabis and THC products into the definitions. The THC policy, the intent here is very specifically to be able to address inquiries we have about whether or not we would allow THC beverage or edible sales within our concessions, as well as at public events. It would follow, whereas the first one follows very much how we approach tobacco, this one follows very much how we would approach alcohol. So you would be in a situation where the concessionaire or the permit holder would be responsible for having all the required licensure, any of the required requirements for the sale of that type of THC would be for them to have. We would be asking for regular proof that they have those types of licensure in place. This would be a policy, so enforcement would again be by staff or community. There would be no penalties associated with that. However, you could escalate that and it could result in an ejection from park property. I will say the actual licensure component, so individuals being able to be licensed to sell the product, that would fall under any penalties that the state of Minnesota would have in place if the individual wasn't properly licensed to actually sell it. We would simply be in the position of permitting it to be used or to be sold within our facilities. This policy is intended to be pretty straightforward. It's intended to reference relative state law. It's intended to be focused very specific on THC edibles and beverages. It's not meant to be focused on the smoking or vaping of THC or of cannabis. That would be in the other policy. It lays out specifically how we would approach it from a concession standpoint, as well as a public event standpoint. And similar to how we approach concessions and events, designated areas, sales separate from alcohol, all of those pieces would be very similar to how we approach alcohol. Those are the policies. They're available until January 21st at 4:30 p.m. for public review. Our goal is, and we've had a lot of response, I will say we've had quite a significant amount of response, also boosted through a social media push as well. So there's also all kinds of comments we've received through social media that we'll be tabulating. Our goal is to tabulate those responses through February and be able to bring back recommended policies to you in March.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there a discussion or questions? I see Commissioner Schaefer.
I just was curious if we had a way to geolocate where responses come, if they come within the metro area, if they come from out of state, to our cannabis survey.
President Abeni, Commissioner Schaefer, it's possible maybe to be able to pull some data from the IP numbers that we have that would be related to the computers where they came from. That may or may not give you a great level of information, but that would be maybe the closest we could get to that.
It may be a curious exercise because I think we've seen not just this survey, other surveys across the board where a particular viewpoint or perspective is amplified within a broader national audience around a particular infrastructure project or, policy. So I really do think that if it's not something that we have the capability to do right now, I think that's really important that we get a handle on so that we can make sure that we're representing, for sure, Minneapolis, and for sure our regional system, our regional park users and greater Minnesota, but we really don't need the input from elsewhere.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. I would agree. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, President Benny. I have a question. First of all, I concur with Commissioner Schaefer. I find online things deeply problematic because of exactly that. But I don't know how to put Pandora back in her box, but it's a problem in general. So I just something pricked in my ear because the last time we had this conversation, the conversation was very heavy on ordinances, and now I heard sold in our facilities, which I was like, that's a different conversation. Is that something we're entertaining to our vendors? Or would it be something that could be part of this policy? I guess I didn't realize the policy was as deeply comprehensive as both / potential ordinances, which I believe that ship has sailed, and then also whether or not we would actually sell it in our parks.
President Abeni, President Abeni, Commissioner Thompson, there are two policies out for public review right now. One of them is patterned after our tobacco policy, where we add cannabis to the tobacco policy, and it's really focused on smoking and vaping within the system. Mm-hmm. The second one is really patterned after how we think about alcohol sales within our concessions as well as within our permitted events. And it establishes a route for either a concessionaire or a permit holder to be able to have THC gummy or beverage sales within their operations.
That's good to know. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I see Commissioner Forney. Yep.
Thank you. Just curious, have we ever had, at any of our events where we have vendors and everything, have they sold cigarettes? I know you may not have that answer, but just a curious thing.
President Abeni, Commissioner Forney, I might have to look back historically over time to know that all of these, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, THC, cannabis, over time, I think the public opinion changes in terms of what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And I would have to go back probably some distance to see if we ever allowed tobacco sales at any of our events prior to maybe how we currently think of tobacco and those sales. But in the 25 years that I've been here, I'm not aware of any tobacco sales.
Thank you.
Vice President Musich.
Thank you, President Forney. The last Forney, sorry, I'm in habit.
I bet you.
President Abeni, my apologies. Commissioner Forney's question might lead people to believe that we're proposing selling herb or flower or something that's smokable via our vendors. And as I read what's out for public comment, I believe all that would be covered would be edibles or beverages. And if I'm mistaken in that, I'd appreciate if you could correct me.
President Abeni, Vice President Musich, you are correct. This is really focused on THC gummies, edibles, beverages. Nothing with the flower, nothing smokable, nothing vapable.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Schaefer.
I just wanted to make one comment to Commissioner Thompson's point that the ship has sailed around ordinances. I believe that is fairly true, but I also think we are getting our feedback from our constituents now. So to me, as a commissioner, I want to represent what we hear from the broader community and not make any assumptions that what we thought policy was better than ordinance is something that the public will agree with or not agree with. So I think that we as a commissioner board, we set the tone and we set the ordinances. So until we have made that decision, the ship has not sailed.
Thank you for that comment. Are there other comments or other discussion? All right, well, thank you for the presentation, and I'll move to petitions and communications. So I have to start with Commissioner Elper.
Pass.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Pass.
Commissioner Menz.
I will not pass today. So a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. In my community, we are obviously having to elect a new SD60, so that's kind of something that's happening. I wanted to address one of the speakers today because I've had a lot of constituent feedback around our centralized registration policy and the implementation. And I've been trying to really talk a lot of coaches off the ledge, and there's a lot of misunderstanding around how it will be implemented. And I think that the staff has done a good job of making sure that they've gone through the process and they've released it, and we're trying something new, something needed to fix, something needed to be changed. But I do think that we need to be open to making sure that we are as inclusive as we possibly can be. I think that the policy is being interpreted in a way that does not reflect what the park board values are around youth sports. I think that we can do that if we're open to those suggestions and feedback. One thing I would like to comment on as one of the commissioners up here and a person who's involved in this community, I think I asked Recreation multiple times about who was on the task force to create centralized registration. And I think that it is obvious now that we did not include the communities that we needed to include. We need to include communities who are impacted by the decisions that we possibly could make. And the failure to make those phone calls is becoming more and more a problem. And I don't want to be a negative person up here. We have done a lot of positive, but we have to get better at involving the communities that are going to be impacted by the decisions we make, because it might not change any decision, but it will change the effect of how people feel about those decisions and how included they feel and how their organizations feel. So I want to make sure that we're open to that, and that, centralized registration is a necessity, but it doesn't need to be a necessity to be exclusive or to hold people out. So just I've gotten a lot of feedback on that. Otherwise, congratulations to President Abeni.
Thank you, Commissioner Menz. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. I wasn't going to say anything, but I'll piggyback on Commissioner Menz because this is very interesting. I actually have had no feedback on that, but it was clearly my constituents that were here, and I would like to reach out, since this is communication, to any Northside organization that this is affecting, to feel free to write me, and I will absolutely get together with you. I already tried to connect with Mr. Moses after I heard him speak. I would agree. I was taken aback a little bit to see the way that they were feeling about this, because perhaps it's a mea culpa that I didn't recognize this would be such a problematic thing. So thank you to the people who brought it to our attention. Thanks.
Commissioner Forney.
Oh, pass.
Commissioner Olson.
Pass.
Commissioner Rucker.
Pass.
Vice President Musich.
I will not be passing. My apologies, everyone. I know you're excited for a short meeting. I have been getting feedback about the centralized registration as well. It's largely very positive. I've been hearing from families whose kids ended up not playing sports under our previous policy. They're very excited to see now that we're putting in place something that will ensure that every kid that wants to play gets put on a team. I also have one of the longest operating youth sports councils in my district that's impacted by this as well. They had been doing all of the registration directly and bringing coaches and scheduling practices and whatnot. And they've also reached out. They are glad to see that we're taking some steps to standardize the way that we're offering sports across the system and addressing some of the concerns that have been brought forward previously. They will continue to operate to support in terms of a booster organization for the park itself. So I was excited to hear that they're not totally stepping away. They're very excited to continue to help ensure sports are engaging and well put on in Minneapolis. So yeah, I'm not getting the negative feedback. So I understand that it is a change and that change is not always going to be received well. But I'm hopeful that as we work through this first year of it, that we will find where the pain points are and find ways to address those. I also have been just super excited to see everyone that's out skating, even in this super frigid, cold weather. I saw an entire family of people this last week playing pond hockey on one of the stormwater ponds out by where I live, and it was just so cute to see like 2-year-olds to grandma and grandpa in their 70s and 80s out playing some pond hockey on a pond, especially after last winter when we could not play on the ice. So it's been really great to see winter coming back and giving us some of these really important traditions that keep us active and happy and healthy in Minnesota in the wintertime.
Thank you. I'll just make a couple of quick comments. One is related to the comments that Commissioner Schaefer made about public comment. And I served on the audit committee for the past 3 years, and this year in 2025, Commissioner Thompson will be on that. But one of the things that we added, and I added it to the adopted project list, was to actually find a way for the audit committee to review whether or not the city and the park board are able to determine where comments are coming from. The one problem I see is that project is moving down the list as other projects are coming online, but perhaps Commissioner Thompson can advocate for that one coming back up higher on the list in 2025. And then the other thing I'll comment on is that this is in my district, which is really the best district, I'm sorry to say. The annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration on the 20th, Monday, of course, at 6:30 p.m. at the wonderful park that is named after him, Martin Luther King Park. And so we'll have another opportunity to share this at our next meeting, but please put this on your calendar. There's a great lineup of people, and I've been to this for a couple of years, and it's a fun event. And with that, I'll declare this meeting adjourned.
I'd like to convene the Planning Committee here at 6:19. If our secretary will please call the roll.
Commissioner Elper.
Present.
Commissioner Rucker.
Here.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Present.
Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
Chair Forney.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. I will take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That action carries. We have no minutes. We do have a public hearing at 6:30 in 10 minutes. But first of all, we will go to Resolution 2024-280. If somebody would like to read that for me, please.
I will read Resolution 2024-280, resolution approving a memorandum of understanding with the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization and accepting a grant in the amount of up to $140,000 from MWNO for the acquisition of a portion of the Malcolm Yards development, part of the Grand Rounds Missing Link Regional Trail.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Not seeing any lights. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That action carries. Okay, we will move to our next resolution, which will mean, go ahead, please.
I'll move Resolution 2024-282, resolution approving the final concept plan for Fireview Park Phase 2 improvements, a part of the North Service area of Minneapolis.
So we will have a presentation, hopefully. All right, excuse me, Crystal. Thank you.
President Abene, Commissioner Forney, Commissioners, thanks for taking some time so I can share with you a project at Farview Park that we are working on. I'm here to share a concept plan that we have been developing over the summer and fall, and looking at adding some additional improvements to the park. If you've been to Farview Park, you know that one of the great amenities, in addition to a really great premier field, is the rec center, which serves many, many youth. And also, a couple of years ago, I actually was involved in doing the playground there. Gets a lot of use as well. And so it's exciting to be back, keep working on that park, and get to see the kind of iteration of new improvements. Our focus this summer was to kind of scope and figure out what the focus of the next phase of improvements would be. We met with a lot of staff to start and just to kind of hone in what the potential projects would be and kind of hear what their needs were. And then we brought some different kind of ideas to the community over the fall, meeting with I guess it's called the Teen Night Owl program, meeting with all of them. Going to the Hawthorne Neighborhood Association and meeting at a couple of their events and getting feedback on what things we should focus on. This is the long-range plan for the park, and we were looking at what things in this and what other things we might be able to work on. For the project, we have just over $1.4 million to make these improvements. As I mentioned just a minute ago, some of the engagement tools we try to do are really in person because, as you know, sometimes surveys don't get people's responses. And so just meeting with people at the park was really the best way. So we attended a couple of events and then also the soccer tournament and just talked to people who were using the park. We decided to take the scopes of work that we could potentially work on and kind of tier them in different categories and understand what people would want to prioritize. And obviously, the first thing was the adventure playground, the hillside slide, which was something that we had wanted to do in the first phase of improvements to the playground. So it was really exciting that that was the next thing that people wanted to see. The other thing was adding a full court basketball court and a half court at this park. Right now there's 2 half courts and they're kind of at the end of their lifespan.
Constant.
And then the third thing were just like general picnic improvements. A lot of the picnic tables are really kind of run down. So these are the kind of main focuses. We also asked about other things like field lighting and perimeter improvements. And the things that rose to the top were these things. From that, we created a concept plan, which we shared back with the public to get more feedback and to see if we were kind of on track. And kids were really excited about to see the basketball and to see especially the hillside slide, which would be, I think, one of the first ones we're doing in our park system. The other part of that the Hawthorne community was really excited about was the idea of creating a path to the top of the hill. If you've ever been to Farview and you've ever walked to the top of the hill, there's an amazing view of downtown. So one of the goals is to really get a path that's accessible up to the top. I'll just go walk through a couple of the features. We kind of focused the project in like 3 main areas. This is the hillside slide. This is the existing playground. And adjacent to that, we would add kind of an adventure play area to expand the playground up into the hill. These are some kind of precedent images that we're looking at. The trail to the top of the hill, the goal is to get it as accessible as possible. We would definitely be able to get most of the way up there to be ADA compliant, with the potential to get something that's a little closer to accessible. It probably can't be fully accessible just because of the grades of the hill. But the community felt like that was really a big step forward because a lot of people don't even know to go up there. The other thing we're focusing on is the basketball court and improving that. And our goal was to really fit that in without disturbing the beautiful tree canopy. So we moved the half court over here where it's more open and we'll be able to accommodate it. And that we'll be able to build with if we have enough funds. Right now, it looks like we're close, so we'll see. The other focus was really to try to improve the experience of, going to a game, doing youth athletics, and then also just for picnicking, which happens right kind of here, right by the building. And so we were working on getting an accessible path down to the premier field. Currently, the other one's kind of far away from the building and the parking lot. So we would be expanding that. We'd also be adding a new building. We looked at renovating the existing building, which is two-tiered. It's not accessible right now. There's no sanitary, no water, no electric. So just to add all of those things, the costs were just too high. So we would be working on adding a new kind of prefab building. We'd also be improving the picnic area at the top of the hill and just kind of generally making the space more organized and intentional. The other area we'd be improving picnicking is right by the wading pool and the basketball court, which currently has picnic tables and gets a lot of use, but they're probably 30 years old or something like that. Finally, this is just the tree preservation plan by forestry. So we were looking at kind of how do we preserve high priority trees in this park. As you know, that's one of the biggest things about this park that people love are the beautiful trees. So we're working on reducing impacts to those trees with our plan. And we'll continue to work on that as we develop the plan further. That's all I have. If you have any questions.
Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, Chair Forney. I don't serve on this committee, so I appreciate being given an opportunity to speak. You mentioned sanitary sewer and other amenities that would be required for the auxiliary building. Does that mean that that building will have public restrooms in it?
President Abene, Commissioner Musich, we looked at whether we would need to add we looked and asked the community, would you like to have restrooms here? And when we looked into that and the cost to add sanitary, it was pretty expensive. And the community was, while they would like it, there are already restroom buildings that are on the exterior of the building at the rec center. So it was kind of redundant.
Okay.
So
we
will
it's just a storage facility.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Menz.
Thank you. I don't serve on this committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Farview Park's a great park. I'm wondering, so I know there's some coordination around temporary fencing options and having a facility there, a building there. I've participated in athletics at that park on the great premier field. One of the limitations is on the little ball field there. There's no fence, so the ball just keeps running. And I know that the planning department or the recreation department might be purchasing some different fencing options so that maybe it could be more temporary, but it would definitely improve the experience for the users who utilize that facility through the park and recreation. So just thinking about the experience of the kids. Also, I know that there's a huge amount of soccer players and football players who play there on Sundays, and I'm wondering, was that group included in the community engagement around what could be offered there or what would be helpful?
President Abene, Commissioner Menz, we did go out on an evening, I think it was a Saturday, not a Sunday, and tried to kind of reach as many people who are using the sports facilities there as much as we could. And unfortunately, it was really hard to kind of nail that down and figure out who to work with and who to talk to. So I didn't reach that particular group, but I did talk to recreation extensively and also I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name, but the person who kind of schedules like who's using the facilities and just asked them what they wanted to see here. And they did bring a few things to our attention and we looked into them in terms of costs, like the fencing thing, we did look into that.
Oh, great. Thank you.
It is 6:30, and I am going to open up the public hearing if we have anybody. So if it's okay, I'm not even going to read the rules, so I've opened it and hereby close it. And on that, unless there's further questions, all those in favor, leave. We did pass the motion, right? Okay. I mean, we did move it. Okay, so all those in favor of motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? That action carries, and I declare at 6:31. Planning Committee is adjourned.
The time being 6:31, I will call to order the Administration and Finance Committee. Secretary Ringgold, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Elper,
Present.
Commissioner Forney,
Here.
Commissioner Rucker,
Here.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Present.
Chair Thompson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. I have to note, I believe that we have the exact same committee members, just in a different, it's like a shuffle game. Would anyone like to move our agenda for approval?
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor of our agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. And we have 3 action items tonight. Would someone like to move our first one?
Sure, I'll move the first one. Resolution 2024-283, a resolution approving a lease agreement with Marilyn Garber for space on the first floor of the Longfellow House within Minnehaha Regional Park for the period of February 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2025, with 2 one-year extensions at the rate of $100 per month for the first term.
Are there any, thank you for that, Commissioner Elper. Are there any questions, comments, like a presentation? Seeing no lights, let us take this to a vote. All those in favor of Resolution 2024-283, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That action carries. Would someone like to read our next resolution for us? It's robust. Go for it. I can read it. Oh, you can.
Resolution 2024-284, a resolution awarding a construction contract to Custom Builders, Inc. for the base bid amount of $887,848 for the VAWA All-Wheel Park project. To construct the all-wheel park, bid event number 3325, pending approval by the City of Minneapolis Finance and Property Services Procurement Division and the Minneapolis Civil Rights Department. And further authorizing administrative use of a 5% construction contingency up to $44,392.42 for the necessary construction change orders that may arise with the contract, and authorizing the transfer of $424,325 from the 2024 and 2025 Capital Investment Construction Contingency Fund.
Wow. Thank you. Are there any questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Schaefer, or Vice Chair Schaefer. Excuse
Yes,
me.
I would like to ask a question around the budget. We heard earlier when we pulled from the consent agenda that, you know, this was, the bids came in higher than we anticipated. It wasn't really detailed whether it was higher on the site improvements, you know, the site construction part of it, or the all-wheels, or maybe I just didn't hear that. But I'd like to understand, what is the staff reasoning for taking all of the construction contingency fund from 2024 and 2025 for this one project? And like, I mean, we're at the beginning of 2025, so I'm a little concerned.
Chair Thompson, Commissioner Schaefer, so let's see, 2 questions there. One is, what was...
Which project came in over bid primarily, or maybe they both did? And then what was the reasoning behind the funding?
Yep, so Commissioner Thompson, excuse me, Commissioner Schaefer, both of those packages came in higher than anticipated. Okay. So we're using 2024 and 2025, we're kind of finishing up what was remaining of the contingency funds in 2024, and then using a portion of the 2025. So it's not, we're not using all of the 2025 contingency funds. We still have some remaining. The decision to use those funds was, one, we have a board-approved plan to proceed with the master plan for Falwell Park. Within that master plan, there are a number of phases that we've already completed: new tennis courts, athletic field improvements, playground improvements. We received a grant to do this all-wheel skate park facility. We're trying to make sure that we serve all areas of our park with, all of the park system with skate facilities, all-wheel facilities. So again, this is an opportunity for us to expand in North Minneapolis a facility like this that does not exist in this area.
One follow-up question. What is the breakdown between what you're using for 2025 and from 2024?
Chair Thompson, Commissioner Schaefer, I don't have that right in front of me. I'll get that and I'll send that out.
Well, I just think there are several projects, I totally support this plan. I totally support the project. But we also took 10 million from all of our parks this past year for North Commons, delaying all of our other park projects. And I just don't want to leave no margin for overages in other parks projects. I think of Sioux Line Garden coming up. I think of a lot of other things that are a lot of question marks that we don't know what the cost will entail. And so I'm really happy to hear that it's not the majority of what you have planned for 2025 contingency. But yes, I would like to hear what that number is. And it's hard to vote on this for me personally because I don't know what the overall construction number is versus, maybe what is our total for 2025 average, roughly for the whole year.
Chair Thompson, Commissioner Schaefer, do you mean how much we allot to construction contingency or just overall?
The total roll-up number. I know it's like 5% for each project, but would you have an estimate?
I don't, but I can get that. I'll get that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Menz.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. I am not on this committee. I do have a question, Mr. Swenson, possibly asking you again. I'm wondering, so we have two different bids. I'm wondering, what is the decision-making around separate bids versus just getting one bid? Because maybe this construction company couldn't do the other bid, but that seems like a more efficient way to do it. So can anybody speak to that, why we separate these projects sometimes, and particularly this project?
Commissioner Menz, I can try to answer that question. We haven't been able to get more than one bid for a skate park or all-wheel park project in the past, and so the attempt was, if we separated it out, which is what many projects apparently around the country actually do, where you have the site work separate from the all-wheel park, we were hoping to get multiple bids so that we would hopefully get the best and lowest bid and different skate park designers that would be able to do the work. The first time we bid, we actually got 2 bids, and the second time we only got 1. And so the attempt was to get more than 1 bid for the skate park.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Seeing no other lights, I do have one question that arose in my brain as we were talking. What differentiates this from Perkins Hill Park, where we have the pump track? I'm just curious. As the commissioner, I know details, and I thought it was more of a skate park, but then the way you're describing it makes me go, maybe it's more like that one.
Commissioner Thompson, sure, I can answer that too. Perkins Hill is asphalt. You can't really actually skate on that with a skateboard. The pump track is all asphalt, but the park that we're proposing is concrete, which you can skate on or bike on or scooter on or anything like that.
Interesting, thank you. I'm learning every day more and more about skateboards. Too bad I'm not 13 anymore. Any other questions? Seeing no lights, all those in favor of Resolution 2024-284, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'd like to abstain.
Thank you.
Thank
One more.
I would, with great pleasure, would like to move Resolution 2024-285, a resolution entering entering into an endowment affiliation agreement with the Minneapolis Parks Foundation to establish an endowment to assist with funding natural resources, historic infrastructure, and regional park and trail care and maintenance within the Minneapolis Park and Recreation System.
Are we getting a presentation on this? This is a big deal, so I'm sure lots of people want to talk about it, but it looks like we have a presentation, so take it away.
Please.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. Commissioners, we do have a presentation for you. We also have a multi-person presentation. I'll be doing some of it. Sarah Dunaway will be doing some of it. And our new executive director of the Minneapolis Parks Foundation, Ann Hoyt-Taff, will be doing some of it. And to my surprise, Eric White might be doing some of it as well. He's the modeler. He also happened to know him quite well, but I didn't know he was part of it. So welcome, Eric. We have some excitement around this. So if you remember back in 2022, as a board, you started to lay out some of your big funding pursuits. What are those things that, in addition to performance goals and work that you wanted to see us do, what are those things that you wanted to happen that would open up, hopefully over time, some new money or capture existing money that maybe we weren't getting full benefit from, and pulling that into the Minneapolis Park system for the benefit of the work we do. And those were three categories: stormwater, parkways, and endowment. And specifically an endowment, which is what we're focusing on today, we were really looking at where philanthropy could come in and help make the biggest difference in the areas that we know aren't just underfunded, like many of the spaces that we feel are underfunded in our system, but are historically underfunded and are unlikely to be producing new dollars through other sources in the near future. There's been a commissioner and staff team working on this, so Commissioners Forney, Schaefer, and Musich have been really instrumental in helping move this through. Superintendent Bangora, Assistant Superintendent Schroeder, Finance Director Julie Wiseman, and myself. We also, in this process, spent some time talking with other folks doing this work to get an understanding of what might be the starting place for us, what are some things that we should be aiming for, what are the things we should be avoiding. So we are really appreciative to the work that the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation, the Minneapolis Foundation, the University of Minnesota Foundation, of course the Minneapolis Parks Foundation, and MIA provided in terms of kind of their expertise, things that they felt would be important for us to know, as well as kind of their intentionality of collaboration with us over time. At the end of the day, we really pursued very deeply the relationship with the Minneapolis Parks Foundation, and through a little bit more than 10 meetings, we're able to really reach our goal of trying to bring forward to you all the opportunity to consider an endowment agreement. And part of this journey for us, one, was some pretty in-depth sharing of both organization and their needs, really diving into what is the funding picture for the Minneapolis Park Board, what are those areas where we know we will struggle over time to try to secure additional resources through public means, and where philanthropy could have the biggest impact in supporting those areas, and then of course crafted an agreement. The foundation's team is Sarah Dunaway, who you'll hear from in just a minute, Karen Birkland, who isn't here today but provided extensively, Jasmine Russell, who I did see, who is the incoming, or actually current board chair, was incoming at the time, Jennifer Downham, Chief Development Director, and then Ann Hoyt-Taff. And I think at this point, Sarah is going to take it away for a few slides. We got really lucky, Sarah, in her everyday life. This is what she does. She does endowments, and so her being both part of the foundation and kind of a known expert in the field, we were very fortunate. So Sarah, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you and good evening. It's a real honor to be here, and I want to say a tremendous round of thanks to all of the Park Board team who participated in working
on this topic with us. It's a goal that we have had for a long time, and it was exciting when it was a goal that you all identified, and we found a way to work together to build a legacy to support our parks for the future and hopefully sort of permanently. As Jennifer mentioned, in my day job, I'm a lawyer and I work with nonprofits, so I live with endowments a lot. And I always think it's helpful to start at the very beginning, so forgive me, but I'm going to define what we mean by an endowment, just to make sure we all have a shared understanding of what it is that we're talking about. The idea of an endowment is that it's a fund that is supported by charitable gifts from individuals and foundations and others in the community that go to a charitable organization. And the basic idea is it's a permanent endowment, and that you hold the money, the original value of the gifts or the principal, forever, and you invest them, and those investment earnings or return or interest or kind of whatever form they come in, then that gets spent for the charitable purposes of the endowment. So what we're talking about here are soliciting charitable contributions that we will hold in perpetuity for the benefit of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board for the purposes that we've designated, and I'll talk about that here in a second. That the foundation then will invest those assets, they would grow and accumulate over time, and that those earnings would then be distributed, help pay the expenses of running the endowment and soliciting those contributions, but more importantly, support the purposes of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. So it's an exciting but very long-term investment. So as we're all thinking about this, to remember it's really an investment in the future to create an enduring legacy for the park system that we all love so much. To do this and to accomplish it, it requires some real investment of time and effort. Obviously, fundraising, raising the money, stewarding relationships with donors, those people who are willing to give their personal assets in a way that is going to benefit future generations as opposed to necessarily something that they would see in their own lifetime. And then investment management, stewarding those assets over time so that those returns are there for the benefit of the purposes that we've identified. So one of the key pieces of this are what are the purposes of the endowment, and it's really identifying what are those areas within the Minneapolis park system where philanthropy can make the biggest impact. And in particular, where are those areas where public funding has historically been insufficient to cover the need, and honestly that are attractive and interesting to donors, that we're likely to be able to solicit those contributions, that it sparks that passion that leads people to do that giving. And I will credit the team at the Park Board in particular for really digging deep and looking into what are those priorities and what are those areas and working with us collaboratively to identify them. They are historic infrastructure, natural resources, and regional park and trail care and maintenance. And Jennifer will provide some more detail around what those include. But the idea here is that gifts to the endowment would be restricted to those three purposes as a group. And then as distributions come out to the Park Board will decide where within those large categories funds would be allocated each year. So there's some donor restriction and then yet a tremendous amount of discretion for the Park Board to make decisions about how those funds get spent year to year. So I'll hand it back over here.
Thank you, Sarah. So I think one thing as I begin on these three and just talk about them a little bit, it's, I think, important to recognize and understand that these three things are not the only priorities of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and that over the last 15 years, this board and previous boards have worked really hard to increase funding for capital in neighborhood parks, to look at how we could increase capital in regional parks, how we could increase funding for youth through the $2.6 million that came in to help support youth funding. And so it's not that these are the only three things that are important, it's that these are the three things that continue to keep getting pushed down the line as we focus on those other really core important things for us as an organization. And so historic infrastructure was one. We are fortunate to have a real strong heritage around WPA infrastructure, CCC infrastructure, a lot of those things holding up, some of them not as well anymore. And when we think about that and we think about just the core infrastructure holding up much of our system, we know that we do not have the ability with the existing capital program or even the existing operating dollars to fully maintain that infrastructure in the way that ideally it would be maintained. And to just take a little bit from Michael Schroeder here a little bit, I think there's also this piece of what is the way you would do shoreline today? Would you armor it in or would you do something different? So when we think about the historic infrastructure, it's not just recreating maybe as it is today, but what's the best solution moving forward and finding the funding to help do that. It's really rooted in what the Minneapolis Park Board and its sense of the parks really is. What is its historic piece? It's not necessarily driven by federal, state, or city. This would really be balanced at looking at what the park system deems as the historic infrastructure and recognizing that over time, recreational needs change. Ecology changes, and so there will likely be an evolution of some of that infrastructure, but we currently are not seeing that funding available through public sources, nor is it an easy thing to get through public sources to be able to make those changes or address those assets. Another category is this natural resources focusing on land, water, and forests. I think since we were all together last talking about this, we added a lot of the urban forest, urban canopy into this one. This would look at both neighborhood and regional parks. So those natural resource ideas that have come up through different service area plans, different regional long-range plans, those types of projects would all be eligible for these types of dollars, as well as the programming, the maintenance, and the ongoing care of those types of projects and that type of work in our system. One caveat on this is that obviously we've been working really hard on stormwater utility. And so we would want to make sure that as this moves forward, that things that could be funded out of stormwater utility aren't funded out of here. So we're able to really direct these resources to the best and highest purpose for what they're available for. And then the third one has been, I think, a real passion for this board in particular, and that's the general upkeep and care of regional parks and regional trails. So this isn't necessarily repaving something. This is not rebuilding something. This is the day-to-day upkeep and care of the regional park and trail system. And this is the category that we talk a lot about. This is the part of our overall state legislation that establishes that we would be getting 40% of what we pay from an operating cost to go into kind of reimbursing us for these expenses. So in the event that we have never gotten that, and in the entire existence of the regional park system, this one is called out with the actual language of those dollars, that operations and maintenance expenditures and kind of the types of items that is allocated to it. And this is a big move, right? If you are, along with the Parks Foundation and philanthropy, able to get money to go into these categories, that means the general fund dollars that aren't being reimbursed could start being looked at for other types of expenditures within the system. So this is a way to look at trying to fulfill the needs that we see there and are being kind of over-supported by the general fund currently in terms of where we've been, what's been promised to us in the past. So those are the three key categories. Again, I just will reiterate, everybody would know that these are not the only things that are important to you as a board. These are really being brought forward as the things that, if these are funded through another source, it lets your public dollars go towards the items that are really important to you as a board, like youth, like neighborhood parks, like regional park reconstruction and rehab. So with that, I believe I hand it to Sarah to explain more about the actual agreement.
Thank you. So now we're going to turn to the actual affiliation agreement that's before you. So the idea of this agreement is that the Minneapolis Parks Foundation will establish an endowment and raise money for it. It's restricted to the specific purposes that we talked about, and that annual distributions that would be made to the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board for those purposes and without further restriction. So we wouldn't be deciding at the Parks Foundation within those categories. Those would be decisions that the Park Board would make. It contemplates a collaborative oversight structure. So while the Minneapolis Parks Foundation would have fiduciary duties over these assets to manage and invest them, we recognize that for this to be successful, both in terms of the raising of the funds, but also the spending the funds and the working together, that it really is a joint endeavor. And so this contemplates establishing what we've called the Joint Endowment Committee, that would be a joint committee between both representatives from the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board and representatives from the Minneapolis Parks Foundation that would provide the key oversight, input, and collaboration. In addition, the Minneapolis Parks Foundation would have an investment committee that would oversee these investments as well as other investments from the foundation, and we would have a Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board appointee to serve on that committee as well. So under this agreement, the Minneapolis Parks Foundation would be responsible for raising the funds, for managing the investments, for administering the endowment and recognizing donors, and for reporting back to the park board around how all of those activities are happening, recognizing that that joint endowment committee will be the key point of communication for both of us. So talking a little bit more about what that looks like, the role of the joint endowment committee would be that it would develop and approve 5-year goals. This is a long-term relationship, but we thought taking it off in sort of 5-year chunks would be a reasonable way to approach this. And then to develop a process for how we track progress against those goals and address if things are falling short or needs to be adjusted. It could include establishing limitations around activities that couldn't be taken, as well as accomplishing what we will do in order to accomplish those goals. And then that group would, of course, serve in a really important advisory role for fundraising campaigns that would be enacted to support the goals and the work to develop and build the endowment. Looking at who would be on it, the affiliation agreement contemplates that there would be 2 commissioners appointed by the president, with preference that they not be the same people who serve on the Minneapolis Parks Foundation board. We'd have 2 Parks Foundation board members, likewise with a preference that they not then also be the commissioner. So we've got good representation from both organizations, the superintendent or the deputy, and the Minneapolis Parks Foundation executive director or our chief development officer. And then others may be invited to participate as needed. In particular, we recognize that the finance leads for each of our organizations probably have an important role, and others could participate as well. That group would also be then responsible for receiving information from the Parks Foundation and reporting back to all of you, and serve as just a point of contact, both in terms of how we're working together, and if we run into issues, that would be our first point of contact for working through potential disputes. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Anne.
I'm going to move us on from the mechanics, the how we're doing all this, to the what. Why did we create all that process? What is it for? It's for raising these funds that are going to be incredibly impactful from day one, because they're going to inspire the next person to give, and then 10 years down, we start doing the distributions and beyond. So investment management is a major piece of any endowment work. That is a role that through the agreement, the Minneapolis Parks Foundation will take on. What that looks like at the highest level is our job at the foundation will be to provide a sustainable, reliable, and needed source of funding for the purposes in perpetuity. That's the goal of the agreement through this investment management. We will establish an investment committee as part of our board committee. It will include 1 park board representative on that investment committee. The investment committee will set the policies around how we make our investments, what we're looking for, how we hire investment managers, as well as the spending policy, which is another term for deciding how the dollars are distributed through annual distributions. So the responsibilities again here are hiring and overseeing outside investment managers. You need folks who will do this work. As a result, an investment fee is a part of any endowment work, and we can talk about how that gets calculated into the model. We did a lot of that with our working group. That development and ongoing review of the spending policy, I mentioned the development and ongoing review, of course, of the investment policy that's guiding the work, and then all the administration and reporting, including making sure we're complying with any state, local, and federal laws that oversee endowments. So we also wanted to talk with you about supporting the work. And as I came into this process as the new executive director, started 6 months ago, these are really the conversations I've been able to engage in with our commissioners who worked on this and with my colleagues at the Parks Foundation. And this goes to how is the money distributed? We know that we need allocations to the Parks Foundation to support this work and the staffing capacity and other resources that are required to stand up an endowment and to administer an endowment. We also want to make sure you all understand how those distributions will come out each year to support the work at the Park Board. So this is a snapshot of the fee, the allocation model that you see in the agreement. And we can go very high, we can go way in the weeds. I'm going to strike it at the middle and answer your questions at the end of the presentation. Commissioner Schaefer is smiling because we have gone in the weeds and it's been helpful. So when we are sitting at the beginning of our endowment, $0 to $50,000, there's not going to be any percentages taken off from our gifts. There's not going to be any annual distributions. There'll be no percentages taken off. When we're sitting in an endowment balance of $50,000 to $10 million, the Parks Foundation will be allocated 5% after the first $50,000 of each gift that comes in. So a gift comes in for $50,000, there's no fee. A gift comes in for $100,000, there's a 5% fee on that. When we are under $10 million, per the agreement, there are no annual distributions. So there is no percentage fee taken off of annual distributions because there are no annual distributions. Moving into that $10 to $100 million range, there is an allocation off of each gift at 5% after the first $50,000, and also an annual allocation off the distribution of 5%. And then you reach into your true perpetuity. You've got an incredibly strong endowment at $100 million or more. And that's when we shift away from taking any sort of allocation off of gifts that are coming in, and the work of the Parks Foundation to manage this endowment is then fully supported through a percentage off of the annual distributions. One thing to note, and we have done some further math I can talk to you about, is there's a cap on this. And I think everyone automatically thinks about, what about the windfall gift that comes in, right? What about a really large gift comes in? 5% of that can be a really large amount. That might not be an amount that Minneapolis Parks Foundation needs to do its work. The core of this agreement is that our goal around the allocation structure is to distribute as much as possible to the purposes of the agreement, while still ensuring the Parks Foundation can do its work and do its work in a compliant and ethical and positive way. And so striking that balance, there is a cap on the MPF allocations, which is the sum of 10% of the foundation's actual operating expenses for the current and four prior years of those already allocated in those past years. So every year there's a cap on how much we can actually take out of those gifts. We did do some modeling I've mentioned offhand. This is why Eric is here from the financial consulting group. He helped us run some numbers. We looked at what do potential fees look like for a year when we're in the middle line, the second to middle line, and the last line of this fee allocation, just to play out how this would work, and that's work that the working group looked through. Supporting the work also means making sure that MPRB gets its annual allocation to do the work. And so, as I mentioned, until the endowment reaches $10 million or 10 years, the funds are held to encourage growth. There will not be any annual distributions. But per the agreement, once the distributions start, that's when that spending policy kicks in to determine how much is distributed to MPRB. Normally, as we see in other endowments, that's about 4 to 6% of endowment assets. That might be a percentage you could keep in your mind. The funds will be sent every year to MPRB in a lump sum after we take off the MPF allocation. It is restricted to the funding purposes, but you all will be charged, and your predecessors will be charged, or your successors will be charged in how that work is distributed, how those dollars are distributed. And also, I know something that's come up in conversations is if the project isn't there to be done this year, but the money for the allocation comes in this year, that is okay. The money can sit within MPRB to be used at the time that it's needed. I know that that was an important question that came up as well.
Okay, final slide here, next steps. So if the board approves this tonight and advances to the full board next week and is approved, We will then move on to the actual signing of the document and entering into the agreement. And that would allow all of those committees to start being established, fundraising plans start to be developed. And there would also be some really specific work that staff would want to do with commissioners. So in that joint endowment committee, there would be that process of 2 commissioners sitting on that committee setting 5-year goals. We would want to be working with the board as a whole to make sure that the commissioners who are appointed to that committee knew what those 5-year goals are that they'd be representing into that conversation, recognizing that you'd be then speaking on behalf of the board as you brought that into the joint endowment committee. The other part that we would be working on is there's the investment committee where you would have representation as well. And within the actual endowment agreement, there's conversation about there might be areas that this board feels like would be maybe out of reach or off limits for where you would want funding invested that would come to the parks. And so we'd want to have some conversations about that so that if there were areas where you wanted to restrict any type of investments, you would be able to give clear direction to that investment committee on it. So tonight you have an opportunity, if you approve it tonight, you'll have an opportunity next week to finalize it, and then we would start moving into implementation. And we will stand for questions.
Well, I'm sure my colleagues might have some questions, but I would just first like to say I'm thrilled. It's lovely to see all of the Parks Foundation staff and board members here tonight. Commissioner Musich, oh, no, Vice President Musich.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. I served only for part of the time that this was ongoing, and I just wanted to note that former Vice President Crudup was also playing a role in this committee, and I picked up the baton when she left us, and I was just very impressed with all of the work that the group had already done at that point. I think we only made the agreement stronger over time. I'm very excited to see this moving forward. I'm thrilled that the Parks Foundation is willing to be a partner with us in this work. The residents of Minneapolis and the surrounding communities really value the system in a way that I think this will allow them to demonstrate financially even more than they already do with their tax dollars. So I'm very appreciative that we're able to provide this opportunity for people to give back in this way. So thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Schaefer, Vice Chair Schaefer.
Yes, I just too wanted to say thank you for the time and investment of answering my questions that many of you had through this process. And I really think we landed in a great spot. And one thing I'd like to highlight that for my colleagues is that maybe it wasn't exactly highlighted, but this is a really flexible plan. Mm-hmm. We have these 3 buckets, but we have talked over and over again that there is the flexibility if 25 years from now we really have another need that we need to change, that we will have the flexibility, if it makes sense, between the organizations to do that, particularly on the park board side. And really, investing in regional park maintenance will only, on the flip hand, invest in neighborhood park maintenance because it'll free up these dollars, you know. So it can seem from the public perspective that we're just investing in regional, but really it will free up for both parks. And I'm just excited for what lies ahead. Thank you.
President Abeni.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. I'm not on this committee, but I do have to also just say I appreciate the hard work. I know that these meetings were, this went on for a long time to get to this place and to get to the right spot. And I'm really excited about this too, because I think our board did some really good work when we were setting out the strategic directions and identifying these gaps and other gaps that we've also worked on and filled. And former President Forney, I know, really shepherded this along, as well as Superintendent and Deputy Superintendent and others, Commissioner Schaefer. So thank you so much for this. I think this is great, and I hope I'm really optimistic this is a successful strategy, and people in the future will be like, oh, it was so smart what they did back in 2025. So thank you.
Former President Commissioner Forney.
Thank you. Over 11 years ago, I indicated I wanted an endowment established for Minneapolis park system. I am so grateful for all the effort it has taken to bring this legacy to its penultimate vote. I am so very proud of this board that has established already revenue sources that have taken the burden off our taxpayers, and to establish in perpetuity the care of park assets. Government moves slowly, but responsibly. This action tonight will result in a sustainable park system 7 generations from now. And I just want to personally acknowledge my gratitude for, first of all, Tom Evers, who's not here. Sarah, you've just been great, bringing all your professional knowledge. Jasmine, thank you. Karen, who's not here. Jennifer Downham. And Ann, thank you for taking over, for your steadfast support, insights, and guidance. It's really a privilege having worked with you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Menz.
Thank you. I'm not on this committee, but in an effort to be prepared for next week or the next meeting, I'm wondering what the staff time might be engaged in this work on the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board side. I think it's a great, I'm so glad we're doing this. This is amazing. But I do think that doing our due diligence and wondering how much staff time is dedicated to this and where do the gifts come from and are we recruiting them as the foundation? It would be great if some of those questions could be answered at the next meeting, if we don't have time now.
Seeing no other lights, I would just like to echo what Commissioner, former President Meg Forney said. The Parks Foundation is an incredible organization, and I'm humbled to get to even preside over this being brought forth. It is with my deepest gratitude that this connection has been made. A lot of credit goes to Commissioner Forney and her vision that I'd like to think that we all struck up to try to make these kind of things work while we were all together. And I'm very grateful that we had such a willing partner in the foundation to take on this idea to try to help us fund things in a different manner. So thank you all for all of your time and work and energy. And seeing no other lights, except for maybe my own, all those in favor of Resolution 2024-285, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That action carries, and at 7:13, I will call this meeting adjourned.